let me share what I think is the biggest misconception about drawing. And I think it's so important because if we get this wrong, we really are led into the wrong direction and we're led away from whatever direction we'd like to see it going. Now, it's a very understandable misconception because it's not intuitive, it's not what we would think, but it directs all our energy and effort into a place that we're not ready to be. And certainly, if you find yourself thinking, I wish I could draw like so-and-so, and we have this misconception, it's certainly going to lead us the wrong way. Because when we see someone's drawing, it's very understandable that what we end up thinking is, I wish I had their drawing skills. We look at their drawings and we look at the lines and the marks and the effects they've created from them. And we think, I wish I had the ability to do that. And because we're focusing on what we see, we try in some way, when we draw, to replicate that line work, those marks, the way it's put together. Because we have a finished product of someone else's in our head, that can become our focus. But even more, perhaps subtly and unhelpfully, our focus can be on creating lines and marks. The focus becomes technical skills. The focus becomes my ability to draw lines in a certain way with enough control. Focus is on these technical skills, technical abilities, things we need to practice, things we need to do, holding a pen on the paper. But for me, the longer I draw, and I think the more successfully I draw, I've come to understand that the really important thing are all the things that happen before my pen hits the paper. In other words, they don't actually involve technical drawing skills. I find that those things are actually not nearly as hard to, if you like, practice and work out and bring up to a certain level. The problem, the difficulty, the challenge is to know what lines, what marks I want to put where. Because I can draw a straight line, I can draw a curved line, I can draw parallel lines very close together, but if I don't know where to put them, if I don't know how to draw them, if I don't know when to draw them, having those skills is not a great deal of help to me. What I've come to believe sets us up for drawing success or failure in any one drawing is not really our level of ability in putting the ink or the graphite on the paper, but really the real difficulty, the real challenge, the real, I find, defining thing about whether my drawings work out or not is what happens before that. It's the way we think. It's the way we observe. It's how accurately we can really see what's in our reference or what's in front of us, and to separate what we see from memories that we have of the same objects perhaps, but in a different context and from a different angle. If we have observed wrongly, the best we can do is draw wrongly. Our thinking before we pick up our pen includes starting to develop the creative translation process that will translate this image, whether it's a photographic image or a three-dimensional in front of me reality. It's starting the thought processes that will translate these into marks I can put on the paper with the pen to create a certain effect. These things that we do before we pick up our pen, and certainly this is the case as we become more experienced, don't have to take up a great deal of time. But they do need to happen. But time and time again, I see drawings where the pen has hit the paper before, clearly, well before, adequate thinking, observing has taken place. And it's meant that for the person drawing, whatever their technical skills, they're going to come up short because there isn't the essential foundation in their mind to have a successful drawing. Let me explain 3 aspects in more detail which are part of my process, my thinking, before I actually start my drawing, that I think have had a great deal to do with how my drawings look at the end. And the first thing is that when I've chosen a subject, which often is an intuitive thing, there's something about it that really grabs us and makes us want to invest our energy and effort and skills into drawing, the first thing to do is actually to stay in that place for a moment and to ask, why? What is it about this scene that I want to capture? What is it that excites me? And this is a very important big picture stage. Because while we work out what excites me, what am I wanting to capture, what elements, are they visual elements, are they narrative elements, are they compositional elements, are they contrasting elements? What elements about this make me think, wow? Because these thoughts, the decisions I come to, are going to direct everything that I do from now on. If I crystallize in my mind what's excited me about the scene, what's made me want to draw it, then what I'm doing is I'm starting to now focus in my mind all the thoughts and all the observations I will need to have, I will need to make to, if you like, bring my finished drawing as close to capturing those things as possible. If I just stay at a bit of a generalized, somewhat fuzzy, I really like this, I'm going to draw this, then I haven't really given myself any direction. And when I don't have direction, I'm going to start wandering, I'm going to start meandering all over the place. And in the end, it's going to end up confusing the choices I make, and I will make some choices inconsistently that if I'd had a focus, I could have brought together tightly and used to work towards a bigger impact at the end. When I have an overall vision, and when I sit long enough to work out what that means for my whole drawing, for all of the compositional elements I'm going to place and where I'm going to place them and how I'm going to place them, in some ways, I've done so much of the work already. And if I have the skills I need, the technical skills I need, I now know which ones I need to use, I need to draw on, and when I need to draw on them, and where I need to apply them. And I'm not going to end up with a drawing that's inconsistent in accuracy, in proportion, in line work, in detail. But at least on a good day, I will have captured something, if not much of, the thinking that I've done before I started my drawing. What I have to do next is to work out how I start. The starting, for various reasons, is always the hardest part of a drawing. And therefore, it takes longer, and it should take longer. We need to just have a little bit of a commitment to establishing the foundations at the start of our drawing to increase the chances of its success. And again, much of this is before we put our pen on the paper. Now, careful observation is through all of this, so I haven't made that a point. But I need to observe my reference and work out, now, where is the natural starting point? Where is the best place to start? And by this I really mean, where is the starting point in what my choices are, where it's going to be easiest to capture the most, if you like, sense of scale and proportion most easily. I say most easily so that I can do it as accurately as possible, because whatever I draw first is going to be the foundation of everything else. And if I get the scale wrong, if I get the proportions wrong, my drawing can end up too large, too small, or the various elements not look as though they really go together. I can end up with people who can't actually fit into the doorways that they're adjacent to. And because I most commonly draw architecture, for me, this involves finding a section of the architecture that is relatively straightforward, where I can really study the relationship between the height, the width, and the depth of a certain part of it or parts of it that I can then start with. But for me, I have found it's most helpful not to choose something that's too large. If it's a relatively large box-shaped building, I don't want to start by drawing the whole box, because when I go to put all the architectural detail in, there might be a portico with 5 columns in the center. There might be 4 rectangular windows on each side, all exactly the same. But if I haven't happened to get my outline of the whole box correct, then I'm not going to be able to fit all of those windows in, and keep them in the right proportion. So generally, I start with a smaller scale. I actually might start with drawing the windows going out from the center and then enclose them in the outside shape of the building. Now, generally, I find it works best if what I choose to start with is as much in the center of my scene as is possible. And of course, as well as working really hard to understand in our observation stage the proportions of height and width and so forth, it's also important to see the angles. Again, particularly drawing architecture, where perspective angles are such an immediate visual grab when we look at a scene. I really need to pay attention. Are the angles like this, or like this, or like this? I need to see it. I need to think about it. I need to imagine the lines at that angle on my paper before I let the ink go anywhere near the paper. I want to develop the skills where I can see what I need to see, understand it, visualize it, and then I can draw it confidently and accurately. Now, this third point, I actually have a number of videos on just this point, but it's so important I felt it was worth including it with the first two. And that's, before I start my drawing, I always, and I really mean I always, spend some time doing some exploratory marks on a scrap sheet of paper. Now, I'm not talking about a thumbnail. I'm not necessarily worried about drawing the whole scene, even in a simplified way. What I often focus on is what I intend to start with, because I'm not warmed up with my pen at that stage. That's going to be the hardest part to get accurate, because my hand-eye coordination is not going to be as connected as it will be 5 or 10 minutes into my drawing. And yet, as I said, often what I start with is central to the scene. And so I want it to be accurate. And I've found that exploring the marks and the other possibilities visually and technically and with pens and also practicing angles to make sure I get them accurate, that what I'm thinking in my head in terms of the angle then actually matches up with the angle in my reference, that all of these things I can rehearse, I can practice. And exactly how much I do at this point depends on how much I feel I need to do. Often it's just working out the proportions. So I might draw the space between two columns on the front of a building and look at the actual proportions of the window that has to fit between them, any architectural elements, decorations above or below, and make sure, does it all fit? Is there room? Is this rectangular shape the right proportion to fit all of those things in and have them look right? This stage also lets me check, is a 0.3mm pen okay? Or does it look too inky? Does it look too black? Does it create a different effect to what I see in the reference that I'm wanting to capture? Is there a lightness, an elegance, a simplicity perhaps in the form that I see because of the lighting or because of the actual shape, that a heavier pen, that this thickness of pen actually works against? And therefore I can make the choice before I have any marks on my paper to switch to a finer pen. Maybe a 0.1 will work better. I do that if I think I need to do it in this exploratory stage. Or maybe it lets me work out that the scale is wrong, that for how I'm thinking, once I actually draw a little bit of it, it's too large or too small. Or it won't let me capture the detail that I want to capture. There's simply not room to put that detail in. So I have to draw it larger, or I have to reduce the detail in some way. And a very important part of this step is to work out hatching. If there is going to be hatching, and if I'm not confident about the best direction to do the hatching lines, and I know what direction to do the hatching lines is an ongoing issue for many of us, almost every drawing, then it lets me explore a couple of possibilities. Or it may be, how dark is the value I want to create with the hatching? But whatever the issues are, these 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 minutes if it's going to be a longer drawing of playing around with marks, seeing, do they work? Do they create the effects I'm wanting for the size I want? And am I capturing the right proportions with the way I'm thinking from my observation at this point? Or do I need to go back and observe more carefully, or to think of how I'm going to do this translation work a bit differently? all of this means that when I start my drawing, it's like starting the drawing 10 minutes in. I'm more warmed up, I've got a stronger idea of what I'm trying to do, and I have more confidence, which is always important with line work, particularly with pen. Over and over again, I see drawings where it's quite clear to me that the real problem has been not a lack of drawing skills, not a lack of technical ability, but rather a rush to actually start drawing, to get down to it. When there's a lack of cohesion in the actual drawing, because I suspect there hasn't been a cohesive thought, a cohesive aim, if you like, an essay plan to guide what we write, a drawing plan to guide what we draw that gives direction and help and strength to every other observation and thought process that we do. It is so essential that we don't rush prematurely into actually starting our drawing. Being ready to draw is so important. The real skills, the real challenge in learning to draw are all these thought process elements, all the parts that happen before we ink or pencil on the paper. And these are also the parts that make our drawing ours. These are actually the parts, not the technical skills, but these are the parts that determine what we draw and how we draw it. And these are the things that in the end create our recognizable style, that make our drawings ours. And that's not to say this can't develop and change, but we can't develop a style merely by working on technical skills or in trying to copy someone else's technical skills. It's not the technical skills that are the challenge. It's the thinking, it's the observation that takes place before that. And while there is no shortcut to this, understanding the process makes such an enormous difference, because I can invest some of the time that perhaps I was rushing into doing the actual drawing into thinking more, how do I want my drawing to look? Why am I wanting to draw this scene? What am I hoping to achieve at the end, to say or to do at the end through my drawing? And that will help us make better choices again before the pen hits the paper. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you found it interesting. I hope that you actually give it a go. I really hope that you can spend some time in the next few drawings consciously, not rushing to start, but consciously working through some of these issues, some of these thoughts, and just see if it doesn't help you draw better, faster when you actually come to draw. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, and however it turns out, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.